You know, there are individuals whose work advances technology for the community that you as graduates are going into, and we're thankful for them. We owe them a debt. These people's lives' work parallels the values, the goals, and vision that UAT has for a technology-driven world. And that's why, for this reason, every year we are delighted to honor people whose lives have been given in service of advancing technology. And today, we have two such gentlemen who we're going to recognize. Now, our first recipient, Mr. Joe Ybarra, is not only worthy of recognition, but in many ways, he embodies the future of technology leadership I hope for all of you. Now, to get a feel for it, place yourself in the 1980s. Remember that we don't have computers. But you love games. You play chess, you like board games, you like strategy games. And someone comes up to you and says, hey, look at this thing. It's got chips on it, it's a computer, and it didn't require tape and giant, but you can own this. What Joe did, they said, you know what I can do with that? I'm going to take something I love, which is games, and I'm going to put it on a computer. Wouldn't that be cool? No one's ever done it before, but let's do this. And with this in mind, he became one of the founders of Electronic Arts, which is not only among the first game studios, it really is one of the few software companies those early 80s that still has existence today. I mean, you will know EA from his myriad sports games and others. And what's amazing about those early years, when Joe was there, he designed games at the very beginning, when people hadn't thought of the model before. He was working across platforms that were incredibly diverse, because no standard existed. The parallel I can draw to it today is as we develop for virtual reality, we don't know what the standard's going to be, so you've got to develop for everything. That's the way it was then. You had to figure out how the technology worked, make it available to everything. And along the way, he developed, produced, and sold over 5 million titles, or 5 million units across 50 titles, which by today's standards may not seem like a big number. But when you realize that in the 80s, for each computer, the Amiga, the IBM PC, Apple II, they only sold about 100,000 of those each. So that means that his titles were sitting on over 70% of the computers that anybody bought. That's incredible. And you think about his title list, it is sort of like the who's who of great games of my early years of computing, basically. You think about titles like Alien Legacy, Earth Orbit Stations, Mule, the first John Madden football, Dr. J and Larry Bird go one-on-one, Shadowband, Spellcraft, Starflight. He worked on Stargate Worlds, Bard's Tale, some very early MMOs like the Shadows of Cerberus, Seven Cities of Gold, Matrix Online. These are seminal titles. But what makes him particularly interesting to me and relevant to you as grads is that in doing this, he defined the processes that pave the way for how games are made. In fact, many of the approaches that are used today in our classes and in industry had their first form in the ideas that he and his teams created. And what I want you to think about going forward is that you are going to have those moments. You don't know what the technologies are because they aren't invented yet, but they're going to be there. And somewhere you're going to have those mashup moments where you're going to take a thing that you love and something new, and you're going to build something new. And it's going to take your personal leadership to define the pathway that the people down the road will use as templates for that industry. And so for all these reasons, I'm very proud today to confer an Honorary Doctorate of Science and Technology upon Mr. Joe Ybarra. Joe?
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm back in Arizona for the first time in a couple of years, as was mentioned earlier, and I'm really surprised at how different it's become. I'm going to take a couple minutes here to talk a little bit about the journey that it takes to be able to accomplish just to get to the point where we started Electronic Arts. As you just heard, a lot of the work that I'm recognized for took place after Electronic Arts, and when we started that company and all the different success and products that I was able to be involved with. But before that, as was indicated before, we really didn't have any kind of a computer gaming environment per se. It was all sold. What few games you could buy were bought in baggies at Radio Shack or at other specialty computer stores, none of which really exist anymore. But as I thought back about how do I explain to people, how do you become one of the first producers in the history of video games, you have to go back to where the roots of that come from. So in my particular situation here, this is the year that I turned 65. And as a result, now I'm on Medicare and I'm in Social Security, so I get to be an official old man now. So this is pretty exciting, actually, a new phase of my life. But when you stop and think about, well, what does that mean? Well, in 1952, that was the year I was born. And in 1952, and in that time period, television was just becoming an emerging new technology. And I remember growing up when I was 5, 6 years old that we had a television set that had a screen that was about 6 inches in size and was black and white and weighed about 50 pounds because it was all vacuum tubes. So this was a fairly interesting thing. But in 1957, I was 5 years old. We stop and think about what 1957 is. For those of you that are part of the audience in my age group, you remember what that time period was like. For the rest of you, this is all ancient history. I mean, this is like before they invented gunpowder kind of thing. But the idea here is that at 5 years old, I learned that I was really good at chess. And as a result of being very good at chess for the next almost 15 years of my life, this dominated part of what I was being trained to do and be part of. And being a chess person really teaches you a lot of different things. And I went for a good 7 years before I found somebody that could actually beat me. And during that process, I was able to develop a lot of important things that I didn't realize I was learning as a 5-year-old and going into a 12-year-old, which is I was learning about how to win and how to lose, how to think ahead and search across the chessboard and find the optimum move, how to actually play with grace and dignity, and how to be able to work with people that were older than I was. So there was a lot of different things that arose out of that. But that was only one track, and that track would continue on and will be part of a later portion of this story. Because in parallel with that, when I was 9 years old, now we're in 1961, this is the time when John F. Kennedy said we will go to the moon. And as a result of that statement, he got me interested and excited about the space program. And I was getting up, when I was 9 years old at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I watched all of the shots. The Mercury program, the Gemini program, the Apollo program, all of that different space exploration stuff, and I just absorbed all that information. What this did was it gave me the passion for science and technology. And all of this was happening in parallel with my gaming activities. So one of the other big revelations that occurred was in my junior year of high school. I guess that would have been, no, maybe it was earlier than that now that I think about it. Regardless, I was probably about maybe 14 or 15 years old, and I won a chess tournament, and with the proceeds from that, I was able to buy my first board war game. And for those of you out there that don't know what this genre is, but back in those time periods, if you want to play any kind of sophisticated game, it was going to be a board game. And what they would do is they would take battles from the past, say, for example, like Gettysburg. They'd make an elaborate map of the area. They'd give you all kinds of little counters that you could actually, mimic the different units that were on the playfield, and you'd learn the battles. I fell in love with that. That was so awesome. It combined game theory together with history, together with a spatial orientation and so on. So I fell in love with that, and I ended up building a collection that now is about 600 titles, covering everything you can imagine. So here I've got this great game stuff going on. I've got this passion for science and technology. I now have to go into college. I spent 2 years at the Illinois Institute of Technology thinking that I was going to be in science and I was a physics and math major. I was there for 2 years, and my family could not afford to keep me in college. So I had to leave and go back to work. But one of the most important things that I took out of that experience was I recognized that I was actually able to teach myself the content irrespective of the university. It did not stop me from continuing my education and ongoing learning experience just because I was not at the university. So what ended up happening is that I ran into an individual in 1975, this would have been now, so we fast forward to almost contemporary times, kind of. And the idea was that he presented to me a manual that was an Intel 8008 manual. I looked at it and said, wow, we can make games for this. And he goes, yep. So that began my journey that allowed me to really understand software and hardware technology. I knew nothing about software at the time when I saw that manual, nothing. I also had a very strong background in electronics though, and I knew how to do stuff with electronics, so that allowed me to actually build my first computer. So my first computer that I ever owned in my possession, I had to build, and it took us about 3 months to build it, and we had to go through and do everything. We had to solder all the pieces into the computer, we had to write all the low-level code that was going to make it work, et cetera, et cetera. So you put together that with the fact that I already knew about games, and as you fast forward a little bit longer there, I was able to, I was working for Apple Computer in their software publishing group. Got the call from Trip Hawkins, and he said that we understand that you know about software publishing, because that's what I did for Apple Computer. And I said, absolutely. He says, we're going to make a game company. And at that point, the journey really begins, actually, in many respects. So one of the things that I thought was really a good ending point for this is the fact that I heard recently during the basketball playoffs, one of the players say that luck is what you get when you combine preparation with opportunity. And this story that I just relayed to you is a perfect example of that. And then, as I mentioned, the story is ending here at the beginning of Electronic Arts. From that point on, I have 35 more years of story that continue that journey that I just described. I'm telling you all this because I'm encouraging you graduates and everybody else in the audience to really analyze your own experiences and tell yourself and just sign up right now that you will not stop learning ever. The journey of going into the workforce is only the beginning of a whole new set of experiences. And because you are not necessarily in an organized environment, it should not prohibit you from continuing your lifelong journey of education. So for me, not having a degree and getting this honor here at UAT is just totally amazing. I was just like speechless when I found out that this was going to happen. And I think that it's a special honor for me because of this background that I just described to you. So I want to thank everybody here for conferring this honor, and I wish all of you people good luck in the future. Thank you.